Um, so this is some Fallout 76 gameplay I recorded during the last beta session, which was on November 7th, I think. November 8th. Was it? November... No, it was November 8th. Yeah, anyways, I forgot... It was off a Twitch stream, and I forgot to turn on... record my audio. So it's just me... This first part is me doing inventory management with no audio. So, to make up for the lack of speaking, I will be reading The Audacity of Hope, Thoughts on Reclaiming the American Dream, written by our former president, Barack Obama. I'll be starting on chapter 1, page 13, and I will be skipping the prologue. Without further ado, we shall start. On most days, Chapter 1, Republicans and Democrats. On most days, I enter the Capitol through the basement. A small subway train carries me from the Hart Building, where my office is located. Through an underground tunnel lined with flags and seals of the 50 states, the train creaks to a halt, and I make my way past bustling staffers, maintenance crews, and the occasional tour group. The bank of old elevators that takes me to the second floor. Stepping off, I weave around the swarm of press that normally gathers there. Say hello to the Capitol Police and enter. Enter through a stately set of double doors onto the floor of the U.S. Senate. The Senate chamber is not the most beautiful space in the Capitol, but it is the most imposing nonetheless. The dun-colored walls are set off by panels of blue damask and columns of finely veined marble. Overhead, the ceiling forms a creamy white oval with an American eagle etched in its center. Above the visitors' gallery, the busts of the nation's first 20 vice presidents sit in solemn repose, and in gentle steps 100 mahogany desks rise from the well of the Senate in 4 horseshoe-shaped rows. Some of the desks date back to 1819, and on top each desk is a tidy receptacle for inkwells and quills. Open the drawer of any desk, and you will find within the names of the senators who once used it. Taft and Long, Stennis and Kennedy, scratched or penned in the senator's own hand. Sometimes, standing there in the chamber, I can imagine Paul Douglas or Hubert Humphrey at one of these desks, urging yet again the adoption of civil rights legislation, or Joe McCarthy, a few desks over, thumbing through his list, preparing to name names, or LBJ, prowling the aisles, grab lists, preparing to... Wait, that's not right. No. Yeah, grabbing... Okay. Or LBJ, prowling the aisles, grabbing lapels, and, gathering votes. Sometimes I will wander over to the desk where Daniel Webster once sat and imagine him rising before the packed gallery and his colleagues, his eyes blazing as he thunderously defends the Union against the forces of secession. These moments fade quickly. Except for the few minutes that it takes to vote, my colleagues and I don't spend much time on the Senate floor. Most of the decisions about what bills to call and when to call them, about how the amendments will be handled and how uncooperative senators will be made to cooperate, have been worked out well in advance by the majority leader. The relevant committee chairmen, their staffs, and depending on the degree of controversy involved in the magnanimity of the Republican handling of the bill, the Democrat what the fuck? Okay, I'm just gonna skip that sentence. By the time we reach the floor and the clerk starts calling the roll, each of the senators will have determined, in consultation with his or her staff, caucus leader, preferred lobbyists, interest groups, constituent mail, and ideological leanings, just how to position themselves on the issue. It makes for an efficient process, which is much appreciated by the members, who are juggling 12 or 13-hour schedules and want to get back to their offices to meet constituents or return phone calls. To a nearby hotel Oh, he keeps going off on fucking commas. It sounds like the sentence gonna end, and he just keeps listing shit. Let's see, what was that? They're juggling 12 or 13-hour schedules and want to get back to their office to meet constituents or return phone calls to a nearby hotel to cultivate donors or to the television studio for a live interview. If you stick around, though, you may see one lone senator standing at his desk after the others have left, seeking recognition to deliver a statement on the floor. It may be an explanation of the bill he's introducing, or it may be a broader commentary on some unmet national challenge. The speaker's voice may flare with passion, his arguments about cuts to programs for the poor, or obstructionism on judicial appointments, or the need for energy independence may be soundly constructed. What the fuck? It's such confusing. But the speaker will be addressing a near-empty chamber. Just the presiding officer, a few staffers, the Senate reporter, and C-SPAN's unblinking eye. The speaker will finish. What the hell? What kind of writing is this, Obama? A blue-informed page will silently gather the statement for the official record. Another senator may enter as the first one departs, and she will stand at her desk, seek recognition and deliver her statement, repeating the ritual. In the world's greatest deliberative body, no one is listening. I remember January 4th, 2005, the day that I and a third of the Senate were sworn in as members of the 109th Congress, as a beautiful blur. The sun was bright, the air unreasonably warm. From Illinois, Hawaii, London, and Kenya, my family and friends crowded into the Senate's visitors gallery to cheer as my new colleagues and I stood beside the marbled bay and raised our right hands to take an oath of office. In the old Senate chambers, I joined my wife, Michelle, and her two daughters for a reenactment of the ceremony and picture-taking with Vice President Cheney. True to form, the 6-year-old Malia demurely shook the Vice President's hand, while the then 3-year-old Sasha decided instead to slap palms with the old man before twirling around to wave for the cameras. Afterwards, I watched the girls skip down the East Capitol steps, their pink and red dresses lifting gently in the air. Supreme Court's white columns, a majestic backdrop for the day. Blah, blah, blah. Michelle and I took their hands, and together the four of us walked towards the Library of Congress, where we met a few hundred well-wishers who had traveled in for the day and spent the next several hours in a steady stream of handshakes, hugs, photographs, and autographs. A day of smiles and thanks, of decorum and pageantry. That's how it must have seemed to the Capitol's visitors. But if all of Washington was on its best behavior that day, collectively pausing to affirm the continuity of our democracy, there remained a certain static in the air. That's right. An awareness that the mood would not last. After the family and friends went home, after the receptions ended and the sun slid behind the winter's gray shroud, what would linger over the city was the certainty of a single, seemingly inalterable fact. The country was divided. And so Washington was divided, more divided politically than any time since before World War II. Both the presidential election and various statistical measures appeared to bear out the conventional wisdom. Across the spectrum of issues, Americans disagreed on Iraq, taxes, abortion, guns, the Ten Commandments, gay marriage. Who was disagreeing about that? Gay marriage, immigration, trade, education policy, why does he do this? Why does he go on massive list? Environment regulation, the size of the government, and the role of the courts. Not only did we disagree, but we disagreed vehemently, with partisans on each side of the divide, unrestrained in the vitriol they hurled at opponents. We disagreed on the scope of our disagreements, the nature of our disagreements, the reasons for our disagreement. Half this book is just lists. Like, what the hell, Obama? And the reasons for our disagreement. Everything was contestable, whether it was the cause of climate change or the fact of climate change, the size of the deficit of the culprits to blame for the what? Size of the deficit or the culprits to blame for the deficit. It's confusing to read. For me, none of this was entirely surprising. From a distance, I had followed the escalating ferocity of Washington's political battles: Iran-Contra and Ollie North, the Bork nomination and Willie Horton, Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill, the Clinton election and the Gingrich Revolution, Whitewater and the Starr investigation, the government shutdown, and how long does this go on? For God's sake, Obama. Dangling Chads and Bush versus Gore. With the rest of the public, I had watched the campaign culture metastasize throughout the body politics. As an entire industry of insult, both perpetual and somehow profitable, emerged to dominate cable television, talk radio, and the New York Times bestseller list. And for 8 years in the Illinois legislature, I had gotten some taste of how the game had come to be played. By the time I arrived in Springfield in 1977, the Illinois Senate's Republican majority had adopted the same rules that Speaker Gingrich was then using to maintain absolute control of the U.S. House of Representatives. Without the capacity to get even the most modest amendment debated, much less passed. Sorry, where was I? Get a little bit closer to the computer. It's probably overheating like hell. No one's listening. Okay, maintenance. Without the capacity to get even the most modest amendment debated, much less passed, Democrats would shout and holler
if you have supplies to trade,
and then stand by helplessly as Republicans passed the large corporate tax breaks, stuck it to labor, or slashed social services. Over time, an implacable anger spread through the Democrat caucus, and my colleagues would carefully record every slight and abuse meted out by the GOP. 6 years later, Democrats took control, and the Republicans fared no better. Some of the older veterans would wistfully recall the days when Republicans and Democrats met at night for dinner, hashing out a compromise over steaks and cigars. But even among those old bulls, such fond memories rapidly dimmed the first time the other side political operatives selected them as targets, flooding their districts with mail accusing them of malfeasance, corruption, incompetence, and moral turpitude. I don't claim to have been a passive bystander in all this. I understood the politics as a full contact sport. I understood politics as a full contact sport and minded neither the sharp elbows nor the occasional blindside hit. But occupying, as I did, an ironclad Democratic district, I was spared the worst of Republicans. Occasionally, I would partner up with even my most conservative colleagues to work on a piece of legislation, and over a poker game or a beer, we might conclude that we had more in common than we publicly cared to admit. Which perhaps explains why, throughout my years in Springfield, I had clung to the notion that politics would be different, and that voters wanted something different, that they were tired of distortion, name-calling, soundbite solutions to complicated problems. That if I could reach those voters directly, frame issues as I felt them, explain the choices in as truthful fashion as I knew how, then people's instincts for fair play and common sense would bring them around. Enough of us took that risk, I thought. Not only the country's politics, but the country's policies would change for the better. It was with that mindset that I entered the 2004 U.S. Senate race for the duration of the campaign. Damn it, you said it. For the duration of the campaign, I did my best to say what I thought, keep it clean, and focus on substance. And I won the Democratic primary and then the general election, both by sizable margins. It was tempting to believe that I had proven my point. There was just one problem. My campaign had gone so well that it looked like a fluke. Political observers would note that in a field of 7 Democrat primary candidates, not one of us ran a negative TV ad. The wealthiest candidate of all, a former trader worth at least $300 million, spent $28 million, mostly on a barrage of positive ads, only to flame out the final weeks due to an unflattering divorce file that the press got unsealed. My Republican opponent, a handsome and wealthy former Goldman Sachs partner, is this talking about a Senate race? It is the Senate race. Okay. Goldman Sachs partner turned inner city teacher started attacking my record from the start. Almost from the start. There we go. But before his campaign could get off the ground, he was felled by a divorce scandal of his own. Moral of the story, if you're a politician, don't get divorced. He didn't say that. For the better part of a month, I traveled to Illinois without drawing fire, or being selected to deliver the keynote address at the Democratic National Convention. 17 minutes of unfiltered, uninterrupted airtime on national television. And finally, the Illinois Republican Party inexplicably chose as my opponent former presidential candidate Alan Keyes, a man who had never lived in Illinois and had proved so fierce and unyielding in his position that even conservative Republicans were scared of him. Later, some reporters would declare me the luckiest politician in the entire 50 states. Privately, some of my staff bristled at this assessment, feeling that it discounted our hard work and the appeal of our message. Still, there was no point in denying almost spooky good fortune. I was an outlier, a freak to political insiders. My victory proved nothing. Oh, we're nearly there. There's my good old 50 cal. Look at her, ain't she a beaut? She's my favorite. Yeah, I was just fucking around. Jesus Christ, it's just non-stop inventory, man. I'm really sorry to it. But yeah. Sorry, back to the book. Where was I? Okay, no wonder then, upon my arrival in Washington that January, I felt like the rookie who shows up after the game, his uniform spotless, eager to play, even as his mud-splattered teammates tempted it would. While I had been busy with interviews and photo shoots full of high-minded ideas about the need for less partisanship and acrimony, Democrats had been beaten across the board. Presidency, Senate seats, House seats. My new Democratic colleagues could not have been more welcoming toward you. One of our few bright spots. They would call my victory. We're done with the episode. Nearly there. In the corridors, though, or during a lull in the action on the floor, they pulled me aside and reminded me of what typical Senate campaigns have come to look like. They told me about their fallen leader, Tom Daschle of South Dakota, who had seen millions of dollars worth of negative ads rain down on his head. Full-page newspaper ads and television spots informing his neighbors day after day that he supported baby killing and men and women guns. You were there? A few even suggesting that he treated his first wife badly, despite the fact that she had traveled to South Dakota to help him get reelected. They recalled Max Cleland, the former Georgia incumbent, triple amputee war veteran who had lost his seat in the previous cycle after being accused of insufficient patriotism of aiding and abetting Osama bin Laden. Well, But that's the end of a paragraph, so I'm going to leave it there for this episode. Thank you very much for watching. We will continue. The gameplay of Fallout 76 will continue next episode in part 2. Oh, it's part 2 of that. I think it's just... Oh yeah, part 2. Part 2, this was part 1 of our series, Inventory Management, and next time will be part 2, Digging Around Welsh. Thank you very much for listening. Oh, and if you don't want to listen to this book and watch this boring gameplay, part 4 is where the audio actually comes on. Thanks a bunch for listening, and I'll see you next time.